All right. Hello, everyone. We're back for some more programming for our Python game we're writing in Pygame. So to start, I'll give you a little bit of a recap of what I'm starting from. Oops. So I'm starting from a version of our game where we have our player here as the white rectangle, and then we have an enemy who's blue that's moving about, and then we try to get these red collectibles by moving our player around with the arrow keys. So you can see the file name here up in the top left corner of this window. So if you're looking on GitHub for where the specific version of the file I'm starting from, this is it. Now what we're going to do today is keep the player on screen, because if you actually go and look at what happens here, I can move my player off screen. So this will be something really simple. And to start, I'm just going to save a copy of this. And give it a name that indicates what we've added here. Player on screen. With that being said, if you remember some things we've done before, we're already keeping basically the collectible and the enemy mostly on screen. But if you'll recall, our screen here has this coordinate system like you may have seen in math, where the top left corner is coordinate 0, 0, and then increasing x values go across, increasing y values go down, and then the bottom sort of right corner of our screen is going to be the width -1 and the height -1, just because we start counting at 0. So if we go back to our game here, what we'll want to do is something very similar to what we've done before, which, if you see here, we see where we're checking for our enemy's position being less than 0 or enemy's x position being greater than the screen width in pixels. We're basically just going to need to do a similar thing for the player to keep the player on screen. We could do this in a variety of places, but since we have enemy movement code here, and then we typically have like this update thing where we're doing like the player stuff before the enemy, I'm just going to go up here to right before move the enemy and do keep the player on screen. So how do we do that? Well, it's basically very similar to the enemy code we have written here. So we can do player moved off left side of screen, and player x is less than 0. Now we're going to want to cap the player's x position differently depending on whether they moved off the left or right. So this is going to be a little bit different. If the player moved off left side of screen, then we want the player to basically stay on the left side of the screen, which is going to be coordinate 0, 0. Next, we can check if the player moved off the right side of the screen, which is going to be a little bit more complicated, and actually something we'll probably fix with the enemy code down here. Let's see. Yeah, it's basically what we have being done for the collectibles already, where we need to take into account the size of the collectibles, or in this case the player, because our player and collectible x positions are always the top left corner, and we need to make sure like the right corner doesn't go off the screen. So here we can do max player x position, we'll just call it max player X for now, will be the screen width in pixels minus, where do we have the player size? We have it down here, so I'm going to move this up a little bit here. Minus the player size in pixels will give us our max player X, and therefore we just need to make sure that our player's X position does not become greater than that. But if it does, player moved off right side of screen, and if that's true, we make the player's X equal to the max player X. What else do we want to do? Alright, we need to do the top and bottom of the screen. So player moved off top side of screen. That's the Y coordinates. And then we need to do a similar thing for the bottom of the screen, but we'll need to calculate based on the screen height pixels minus player size in pixels. Y is greater than max player Y. Okay, so assuming I didn't make any typos or anything, this code should work, but it's always good to test it, so I'm going to go ahead and test that right now. I made a typo, which you may not be able to see depending on where my head is, but here, kind of at the bottom of this window, you can see, hey, the player moved off the right side of the screen. That variable hasn't been defined, which means I probably made a typo somewhere. And that way you can see it. So if we go back here, player moved off right screen. It's talking about line 74. Oh, played should be player. There we go. Now let's try that again. Good, our game is running. Let's try to move off the left side of the screen. We can't, that's good. Let's try to move off the top. Can't there either. Let's try to move off the right side of the screen. We can't, so that's good. Let's try to move off the bottom. That's good. So, and let's do this one last corner that we haven't tested yet, just for good measure to make sure nothing's weird going on with the corners. Okay, so that's good. But now one thing we're just going to go ahead and fix now is you see how the enemy on the bottom and right sides of the screen sort of goes off a little bit. We're going to change that so that the enemy is basically capped, similar to the player. And it's basically going to be very similar logic. We're going to need the enemy size in pixels a little bit earlier in our program. So to do that, I'll just move that up here and do max enemy X is going to be the screen width in pixels minus the enemy size in pixels. And then if I just replace that with the max enemy X, that should work there. And then I'm going to need to do a similar thing for the bottom side. So max enemy Y, screen height in pixels minus the enemy size in if we place that, replace that. So now let's test this to make sure things are working and we don't have bugs. Okay, that seems to work fine. Okay, good. So the enemy is now staying on screen as well. So that's it for this video. I hope that made sense, and we'll continue with another video soon.